Hey, this is an interview that I did on the Teach the Geek to Speak podcast with Neil Thompson. And among other topics, we discussed public speaking and how to do a public presentation, what to do about nerves, and how to deal with haters. So hope you enjoy this, and you should by all means go over to Neil's channel, Teach the Geek, his podcast and YouTube channel, and go ahead and hit subscribe. And it's a really great resource for scientists and engineers who are finding themselves having to express their ideas in words. So enjoy that and enjoy this conversation. Take care.
Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. It's a platform for science and engineering professionals. I'm also the creator of the Teach the Geek to Speak online public speaking course. You can learn more about it at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Dr. Darren Lippomi. He's a professor in nanoengineering, studying the areas of soft electronics for solar cells, biosensors, and artificial touch. He's also a podcaster and has a YouTube channel addressing topics related to STEM in academia. I'm interested to learn more about his journey to becoming a professor, his research, and the ways in which public speaking has benefited his career. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Dr. Lippomi.
Thanks, Neil. It's really a pleasure to be here.
So from the bit of research I did on you, I saw that you got your degrees in chemistry. Where did that interest in chemistry come from?
Yeah, so chemistry was that they call it the central science, and it's that field that everything came together in. It was a good mix of quantitative reasoning, but also the molecules and atoms and functional groups felt like characters to me. I could sort of endow these mental models of these elements with human-like characteristics, and it gave it more personality than physics, to me at least, and less memorization than biology. So that's how I ended up in chemistry.
Oh man, I hated biology in high school so much for that same reason, all that memorization. Because I have a poor memory, just generally. I don't remember. It's just actually kind of embarrassing. No matter where I leave, I never can find my car. I park it someplace, and then I come outside and I'm just looking. I don't know where my car is. There's been a
yeah. I'm the same way. I've got to take cell phone pictures of the surroundings just so that I can find my bearings when I'm looking for where I parked.
I remember I went to this concert one time, and I parked my car. I'm telling you, I walked around for half an hour looking for my car. I had no clue where it was.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, but then you didn't stop with an undergraduate degree. You got your PhD. What was the motivation to do that?
Yeah, so at first I always knew that I wanted to do something where I could continue learning. Of course, you could do that in any field, but when it's your job to continue learning, it makes it easier. Maybe there was a little bit of fear too, like I hadn't really had a job in the real world, and I'm like, well, I really like school. I'm good at it. I might as well stay in school and get some letters after my name, and maybe have a closer, a better opportunity to maybe become my own boss sooner if I went into academia. And I just wanted to keep on learning in a formal environment.
But then you weren't done. So then you get your undergraduate degree, you get your PhD, but then you do a postdoc too. From what I understand, people that tend to do postdocs are trying to become professors. Was that your goal, or did you have other plans in mind?
My plans changed a lot growing up in academia. There was a time when I wanted to even quit grad school and start my own restaurant that had live music and brewed its own beer. But I always sort of stayed on this track that led toward academia. So postdoc is, for those of your listeners who don't know, is sort of like an academic residency, like an MD does the residency in a particular field, and a PhD scientist or engineer goes to do a postdoc, which is sort of like a more independent version of being a grad student, where you go to another faculty member's research lab, and they sort of pay for your you to be creative and to become an independent scientist. So I had the idea of academia eventually, and a postdoc, at least in my field in chemistry and chemical engineering, was more or less required to do that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I also kind of wondered the difference between being a PhD candidate and then being a postdoc. I mean, both of you all work in someone else's lab, but I guess the main difference is the PhD candidate still has to kind of be under the thumb of that principal investigator because they don't have the PhD yet. Whereas with someone like yourself, when you're in a postdoc, you do have a PhD, so they can't screw around with you that much, because if they do, you could always leave.
Yeah, I think in the ideal case, a postdoc, back in the day, I've heard that a postdoc position was a very prestigious thing, and not every PhD candidate going into academia actually did a postdoc. It was considered a very high honor to get a postdoctoral position, because you don't have to get the funding yourself. You can just make use of somebody else's resources and do something great. And there was a lot more independence of the postdoc from the PI, or the principal investigator of the lab, back when this concept of postdoc first started. It was like being more than an apprentice, right? But now it's a little bit more like grad student in extended training. There's a little bit of an academic arms race going on, where you just need a longer and longer and longer postdoc to get an academic position. And also the necessity to do a postdoc has gone well beyond the natural sciences. So it's a foregone conclusion that if you want to do academia, even a primarily teaching position in biology, chemistry, or physics, you need to do a postdoc. And then it's kind of leached its way into engineering as well. So chemistry, bioengineering, or chemical engineering and bioengineering, you definitely need a postdoc, and it's becoming more and more and more common in mechanical and electrical and computer engineering as well. Although it's not complete, the requirement for postdoc is not completely saturated those disciplines. It's becoming that way. So it's a little bit like being a senior. Ideally, it's more like you're this independent scientist just working in someone else's group, or engineer working in someone's group. But the postdocs tend to be treated more and more like just super senior graduate students, for better or worse.
Oh, okay. I don't like the sound of that, Dr. Lipome. I don't like the sound of that at all. I liked how it was in the day when it was kind of a prestigious thing, but now it's kind of like, if you want to be a tenure track professor and you don't have a postdoc, good luck, because people are going to kind of not give you even a fair look, because pretty much everybody coming out of a PhD and wanting to be a professor, you're probably told you have to go somewhere else. You got to do a postdoc, and you got to do it for a couple of years, and then you can look at tenure track positions. But before then, it's probably not going to happen for you. And you know what? Another thing that it does, because I know this for a fact. I mean, you said when you're a postdoc, you get your own funding, but it's certainly not a whole lot of money. I don't think you're not becoming a millionaire off of a postdoctoral fellowship. So it extends the amount of time where you can't be making good money, and you have to be doing this to finally get to where you want to go. It's just like, come on, man. I just want to be a professor. Why are you putting up all these hurdles in front of me? And you know what I want to do when I come out of these programs. You want to be first author on published papers, and you want them to be in the big journals. It's keeping people in this kind of in this, I guess, this subservient role longer than perhaps they have to be.
Yeah, it's kind of like a pyramid in that sense. I hate to be depressing about it, but something needs to change in the academic training structure. Postdoc is lucky to make more than $50K, whereas a grad student, might be 28, 35K, depending on where they are.
Damn. Especially if you're in an expensive part of the country. Like, if you're gonna do a postdoc, you gotta do it in the middle of nowhere where nothing costs anything.
Right. That's right.
Don't be doing no postdoc in LA or in New York and any of those expensive cities. Nah. You got to go to Idaho.
Yeah.
From the bit of research I also saw, Dr. Lapomi, you got a certificate in entrepreneurship. Did this have anything to do with that, the restaurant that you wanted to open with the beer that you were brewing, or was there ever a thought that perhaps you were going to become an entrepreneur instead?
Absolutely. Actually, when I graduated from my PhD, I never told my postdoc advisor this, but when I started at Stanford doing my postdoc, it was in, Silicon Valley, and there were, all these tech companies everywhere, and med tech and biotech and energy technology. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to do like a material science based company. So I ended up doing this business training at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. It's a program that's now called Ignite. It wasn't called that at the time. They were still working on the name, but it was a 16-week long program that was 2 evenings per week for 2.5 hours each, so 5 hours at night per week, and then 1 full Saturday per month. So we did that 4 times, and we read case studies, we did projects, we wrote funding proposals, and the course material was very interesting to me, and it was something that that people trained in the natural sciences and engineering don't get to see very often, and that is a week long, like the key points from each of the business business school curriculum. So you take a week in accounting, a week in finance, a week in product market fit, a week in strategy, and then there were soft skills type weeks as well. How to give and receive criticism, how to do public speaking, how to write an effective proposal, and it culminated in an independent project where we got to propose a product or a prototype of a product, or in some cases just our envisioning of a prototype, to a panel of venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, and that was enormously helpful to in the rest of my career, even though I sort of got back on the academic track by the end of my postdoc, and have been a professor now for almost 10 years.
What was the reason you didn't tell your professor that you were going to do that certificate?
I was afraid that she was going to be unsupportive. After she learned that I did it, I think she was very pleased to hear that I did it, that I took the initiative. I had my own funding as a postdoc, which isn't super common. So I felt like I had a little bit more latitude. But in general, a postdoc joins the lab because especially a lab at a top 5, whatever that means, institution, they join that lab because they want to be a professor, right? And to be a professor, you need to publish, several papers as a postdoc, or a good number of strong papers as a postdoc. And I had the impression that her view of me would be degraded if she knew that I had this interest. But it turned out, maybe not to be that well-founded of a fear, because when she eventually did find out, she was fine with it. But I had already secured an academic position by then, and maybe it was easier to swallow.
That's so interesting, because I get the sense that you're not a unicorn in that sense, that other people doing postdocs may not have wanted to tell their PIs that they were potentially going a different way than staying in academia. I've definitely heard stories about people who ended up leaving academia, going into industry, maybe working for a nonprofit, and their PI not being all that happy about it. They maybe think, I spent all this time with this person trying to get them ready to be in academia on the tenure track, and did I waste all my time on this person? And for them to just go into industry, you could have done that after you finished your PhD. But you know what? People's minds change, and it's your life to live at the end of the day. So if someone's going to be upset because you made a different choice, well, I guess it's just they're just going to have to be upset.
Yeah, and each life choice is is testing a hypothesis, right? You don't know what you want to do until you're actually like immersed in it. If you have a hypothesis that maybe I'd be a good professor, so I'm gonna do a postdoc, and it turns out that that you're in this position and you're facing, you are marinating in the idea of applying for this faculty position while you're a postdoc, and you kick around the idea for a while. You're working in the lab 50, 60 hours a week, and you decide, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot of weird kind of fame-seeking competition in academia. I don't, I thought I wanted to do this, but I don't want to do it anymore. And you have to sometimes put yourself in the position where your choice, your hypothesis about your life is about to become a reality before you're in a position to actually make a different choice.
Yeah, no question. I mentioned in the intro that you work on nano engineering. What is nano engineering?
Nano engineering is the exploitation of material structures that derive some properties from from size confinement. So if they have sizes of 100 nanometers or less in one or more dimensions, we call that a nanomaterial. And these structures that are confined in these dimensions have characteristics like most of the atoms reside close to the surface. They have properties like melting point depression and optical properties, plasmonic properties, so they can propagate. They can interact with photons in unique ways. They usually have interesting scattering properties. They can have interesting biological functionality. So most cancer drugs now, at least small molecule cancer drugs, are encapsulated in some kind of nanostructured material. A good example of a nanomaterial that has been in the news in the last 2 years are the mRNA vaccines. So they're encapsulated in lipid nanoparticles. And that to me those are all examples of nanoengineering. So when my department was founded in 2007, it was founded on the basis of, well, so much of technology is going toward composite materials, micro nano fabrication for electronics engineering, micro nano technology for biomedical applications, that we might as well skip all of the continuum stuff and just focus on nanoscale materials and nanoscale processes. And that's where the undergraduate degree program came from. And we also have master's and PhD programs in nanoengineering as well. We also run a more conventional chemical engineering program within our department, and we're actually in the process of incorporating the name chemical engineering into our department name, because the way that our department teaches chemical engineering, or the way that we do research in the area, is still very much focused on molecular and nanoscale materials and interactions of these materials with biological systems or fuel cells or batteries, and so there's sort of a natural fit.
I got you. And I think that's probably a smart idea to incorporate chemical engineering back into the name, because if you're an undergrad, you've got your degree and you're going for a job interview and you say you got a degree in nano engineering, they might look at that and say, what the hell is that? But you say chemical engineering, is like, yeah, I know exactly what that is. Okay, we'll continue.
Yeah, and that's probably a good 60% of the reason that we're doing it, and also to to give the chemical engineering students the recognition that they did their training in a bona fide chemical engineering department.
No question. So then, I also mentioned in the intro that you work on artificial touch. When I first saw that term, I thought to myself, how can touch be artificial? So what exactly is artificial touch?
Yeah, there are a few different ways of looking at the intersection of engineering and touch. One way is to endow robots and prosthetic limbs with the sense of touch that may be interfaced with a controller or processor if you're a robot, or a directly into the nervous system if you are a human subject. The way that we tend to look at it is using technology and material science to understand our sense of touch and mechanosensation. So we're interested in the psychology of touch, the cognition of touch. We're interested in the cellular and molecular mechanisms of touch. So we have a collaborator at the Scripps Research Institute who actually last year won the Nobel Prize for his discovery of the transmembrane proteins in mechanosensory neurons in the skin, and we're building we're in the process of building devices to understand how these things open and close in response to macroscopic forces or forces on the nanoscale that we can apply very precisely. And I've always been interested in human perception and cognition. And as an organic materials chemist, the way into that field seemed to be, well, everything around us in biotic and nominally abiotic environments are all coated with organic structures. So like this latex paint, this polyvinyl chloride green screen shower curtain, my polycarbonate lenses, everything is an organic engineered material. So it seems to me that if you want to recapitulate natural sensations, you ought to be able to control the properties of materials on the organic molecular scale so that you can access types of sensations that don't exist or that can't be accessed using off-the-shelf actuators, like things that buzz and things that shake. That's very limited in terms of like depression into the skin. We're looking at more modalities that can only be accessed with reconfigurable materials.
Wow. I think it's really cool that you collaborate with someone who eventually won or who won a Nobel Prize. Did you ever think to yourself, well, I collaborated with the guy, where the hell's my Nobel Prize?
yeah. So unfortunately, the announcement of the award came out before he won the Nobel Prize. So the grant that we have together came out before he won the Nobel Prize. And if they had only waited a few years for some papers to come out from this collaboration, then I could have basked in the reflected glory of the Nobel Prize, even though, I'm not going to win it myself, but at least there would have been that attention, shown on the work. Nice. But we were a little late, or the Nobel Prize committee was a little early.
Oh man. Oh well, you know what? At least Dr. Lafome, you know what it is. Everyone else may not know, but you know how we got that Nobel Prize. We know. And the people gonna watch this interview, they know too now. So you're a professor. So as a professor, I assume that you teach classes, so you have to, or at least it would probably be a good idea if you got comfortable talking in front of people. Is that something that you've always been good at? And if not, what'd you do to get better at it?
I've always been interested in acting and oratory. When I was a kid, I used to have like a compact VH. Actually, before that, I used to have this PXL 2000 Fisher-Price black and white camcorder that would record 10 minutes of black and white video per side of a high definition audio cassette tape, and I used to use that. It was like the most expensive like toy my parents could possibly ever afford in a million years. And then I used to make movies with my friends. I used to make claymation type things, like just by turning the video camera on and off, like just to get half a second of still frame. When I became a professor, I took teaching very seriously, and I eventually recorded all of my lectures. I would say that speaking is a big part of what makes me interesting as a scientist or as an educator. I really love doing it. For the longest time, I hated the sound of my own voice, but now I think it's not so bad. But I always wanted I like the stage. I don't like I'm not an extrovert in like social settings, but I do like when I can speak with authority and instruct people, and teach them about something for the first time. That's one of the most pleasant experiences in my professional life. Fulfilling experiences.
Do you have a process for putting your presentations together? And if so, what is it?
I try to empathize with the audience, and if I'm giving a technical presentation, I think about the strata of people that may be watching it. And I don't mean like socioeconomic strata. I mean strata of like how much of an expert are they in my in my discipline. So there are people in the community at like community center talk that don't have any technical experience. There are people who are technical experts in their own field and know something about science and engineering, but don't know my field. There are people in my field, but who haven't worked exactly on like a project that I work on. And there are, and what I try to do is aim the level of my speaking 1 to 2 layers toward the less knowledgeable side than where I think the median person is at in the talk, and in that way, people who are new to your field, who happen to be in the audience, can learn something for the first time. Those who are saying, "Yeah, this is known to me, but I'm able to learn something because I have the background to understand." And those who have been doing the experiments and like know what you're saying, like say my students who did the experiments that I'm talking about are in the audience, they can say, that's maybe another way to explain it that I might be able to use in my own presentations. So I really try to empathize with the audience. That's what I would say.
You missed out on a group that could potentially be in the audience, Dr. Lapomi, especially if you're at a conference. It's the haters, the people who are working exactly on what you're working on. And they're looking to poke them holes. Oh, did you think about doing this? Did you think about doing that? Yeah, you got them people too. It's like, I was
trying to stay positive, Neil.
Yeah, I've seen that happen. I'm going to these conference talks. It's like, man, these guys going to throw hands like.
Oh yeah. I picture, in 1870 or whatever, when Thomas Henry Huxley was defending Darwin's theory, and somebody in the audience, in London got up and said, "I think that your theory is rubbish, sir." Sometimes, those conversations can be fun to have. They can be a little bit jarring, but once you get some seniority, you learn how to handle those people.
Yeah, and if all else fails, you say, "Meet me outside." I'll handle you out there in the parking lot. I mentioned also that you have a podcast and a YouTube channel. What do you hope people get out of the podcast and the YouTube channel?
I'm hoping that people learn what it's like to be a scientist, an engineer in a variety of contexts. I do the podcast not as kind of like a wowie thing, like here's what science we did, but it's kind of like a peri-scientific podcast. So we talk about issues of mental health, scientific communication, a lot of the things actually that you talk about on Teach the Geek. We talk about how to write grant proposals. We talk about how to work with your PI, how to manage up in a grad school setting. And I hope that what it does is empower students and early career researchers to get more out of their experience, and maybe also to feel like there is some like there is some empathy, some sympathy, some compassion out there for people, from people who have achieved some, professional success, such as mine is, that there are resources out there for them as individuals, not just as lab rats.
Nice. Well, this has been great talking to you, Dr. Lippomi. Thank you for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm very active on Twitter. So my Twitter handle is just my name with Darren Lippomi with an underscore in between. And my YouTube channel is I think it's the same thing. It's also Darren Lippomi. We have another podcast called, so one podcast is called Molecular Podcasting, and that's sort of my catch-all podcast. But we have another one that's an interview show that I run through the Idea Engineering Student Center called Ideas in STEM Ed. That's available on Spotify and Apple and cross-posted on YouTube as well. So you can find those on the internet at your leisure.
Excellent. Well, this marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson, founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. I'm also the creator of the Teach the Geek to Speak online public speaking course. You can learn about it at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thank you, Dr. Lippomi.
Thank you, Neil.